Thank you, Mr. Secretary. I'm over here on the end. And thank you, Mr. Secretary, for coming back to committee this morning. I know the title of this hearing is the state of the international financial system, but before we get into that, I wanted to quickly discuss a tax issue. The IRS recently announced that corporate alternative minimum tax refunds received under the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act will no longer be subject to sequestration, but AMT refunds received by taxpayers in lieu of claiming bonus depreciation under Section 168 will remain subject to sequestration. Taxpayers earn no interest on AMT prepayments and are counted dollar for dollar against future liabilities. These prepayments operate as interest-free loans to the government that remain until the taxpayer incurs a liability to which the AMT credit is applied. In many cases, these prepayments extend for decades. The only way to receive an AMT credit is to pay the tax. So these are not loopholes exploited by American businesses, but serve as a way to reduce their tax liabilities should they owe money to our favorite uncle, Sam. I don't support a policy that treats these taxpayers differently, particularly in the case where the AMT credits represent prepayments or overpayments of tax and should not be subject to sequester. And, sir, can I get your commitment today that you will look into the actions that the IRS can and should take on behalf of these companies on the AMT credit specifically to remedy this situation?
Yes, I can tell you I am familiar with it. It is a technical issue. We're working with OMB on trying to resolve it. So
thank you. Thank you. And I knew that was probably a pretty quick answer, so thank you for that. And following up on tax issues, on March 5th of this year, the Department of Treasury released a policy statement on the tax regulatory process. This policy statement established the IRS's commitment to notice and comment rulemaking, the limited use of temporary regulations, and the proper role of guidance documents. One key assertion of this policy statement says sub-regulatory guidance is not intended to affect taxpayer rights or obligations independent from underlying statutes or regulations. And unlike statutes and regulations, sub-regulatory guidance does not have the force and effect of law. I wholeheartely agree with this statement, and what I love about a bureaucracy is we actually have guidelines about guidelines. I think that's incredible. Would you be willing to would you be willing to officially adopt this position as the chair of FSOC?
I will review that with FSOC and take it up with them. Sounds like a good idea.
Thank you very much. I think the entire administration needs to have the same view of guidance. I would argue that if this document is good enough for the IRS, it should be equally appropriate for the FSOC or any federal regulatory body in the United States. And again, it's just based on my business background with regulations about guidance. I see my time is running a little bit short, but one final topic I want to discuss is cybersecurity. In June of 2017, Treasury issued a report titled Non-Bank Financial Fintech and Innovation. In this report, Treasury states, regulatory fragmentation, overlap, and duplication, however, can lead to ineffective regulatory oversight and inefficiencies that are costly to the taxpayers, consumers, and businesses. By the way, Mr. Secretary, I think you can see a theme in my questioning today. The report also says that cybersecurity is addressed among a broad group of federal and state regulators through the Financial and Banking Information Infrastructure Committee, FBIIC. When the prudential regulators were here last week, this is something I talked about. I also know that the FBIIC, or the Financial and Banking Information Infrastructure Committee, is chaired by Treasury and comprised of over 15 members from additional regulators. Can you quickly discuss how Treasury is working with the numerous regulatory bodies to harmonize cybersecurity regulations to protect consumers without creating too cumbersome a framework?
Yes, thank you. It is a major priority of mine. We've added additional resources to the department. We've met with public and private partnerships on this, and we really have two tasks. One is harmonization across the regulators. We've recently had a productive meeting with the bank CEOs and the regulators on that. And the second is making sure we have better coordination between our intel, our technical people, and the private sector to make sure that we're fully prepared.
Thank you very much. I think just in closing, I would ask, as we go forward, I would just hope that we don't have any guidance come out about sub-regulatory guidance, which is about the guidance that's actually not regulations. Thank you, and I yield my time.
Thank you. The gentlewoman from Virginia, Mrs. Wexton, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam